You picked up an egg this morning without a second thought. You cracked it, cooked it, tossed the shell in the trash. But in a kitchen 70 years ago, a woman just like your grandmother would have looked at that same egg and seen something you were never taught to see. Here is what I found, and it stopped me cold. The people who lived through the 1950s were not throwing away half of what they held. They were using the whole eggshell, membrane, white, and all for their skin, their bones, their gardens, and their aching joints. And modern doctors, quietly, in studies most people never read, are now admitting those old women were right. I did not believe it at first. I thought it was nostalgia dressed up as wisdom. So I went looking. I dug through home economics manuals from 1952, university extension bulletins, and a medical study published in 2009 that made me put my coffee down. By the end, I had counted 25 separate tricks that ordinary people used every single day, and the last one I uncovered is something I am now doing every morning in my own kitchen. You already have everything you need to do it too. Stay with me because the trail only gets stranger from here. Let me start where I started, with the thing everybody thinks they know. Everyone will tell you that you can check if an egg is fresh by putting it in water. That is not the trick. The trick is what the old cookbooks tell you to do with that information, and it is far more precise than anything printed on a modern carton. In a household guide from 1955, I found a whole method laid out. An egg that lies flat on its side at the bottom of a bowl of water is only a day or two old. An egg that stands up on one end but stays touching the bottom is about 10 days old, and it is perfect for hard boiling because the shell peels clean. An egg that floats to the top is spoiled and should never be eaten. Here is why it works, and it is beautiful in its simplicity. Inside every eggshell there is a tiny air pocket. As the egg ages, moisture and carbon dioxide slowly escape through thousands of microscopic pores in the shell, and air moves in to take their place. The older the egg, the bigger the air pocket, and the more it floats. Grandmother did not know the chemistry. She did not need to. She trusted the water. But that raised a question I could not shake. If those pores let air in and moisture out, then the way we store eggs today might be doing something to them we never think about. So I kept pulling the thread, and what I found next changed the way I stock my own refrigerator. The old-timers stored their eggs pointed end down, not sideways, not in whatever direction the carton happened to land, pointed end down, every time. I thought it was superstition. It is not. That air pocket I just mentioned sits at the wide, rounded end of the egg. When you store the egg with the pointed end facing down, the air pocket stays up at the top, and the yolk stays centered and cushioned, away from the shell. That keeps the egg fresher longer and stops the yolk from drifting and sticking to the side where it spoils faster. A poultry specialist writing for a state agricultural extension office confirmed the same principle decades later. Eggs stored point down held their quality noticeably longer than eggs stored the other way. The women of the 1950s were extending the life of their food by weeks using nothing but the direction they set an egg down. Think about what that means for your grocery bill. Right now, this week, with the carton already in your kitchen. Therefore, the pattern was becoming clear to me. These were not folk charms. These were quiet, tested methods that saved money and prevented waste. But food storage was only the surface. The deeper I dug, the more I realized the old kitchens were treating the egg as medicine, and that is where things got genuinely surprising. Let me tell you about the burn trick, because this one made me nervous and fascinated at the same time. In more than one mid-century household manual, I found the same instruction repeated. If you burned your hand on the stove or the iron, you were told to separate an egg, beat the white lightly, and spread it over the burn. As it dried, it formed a tight, cooling film over the skin. Now, I want to be careful and honest with you, because I promised you evidence, not fairy tales. Modern doctors do not recommend putting raw egg on an open or serious burn because of the risk of bacteria, and I would never tell you to ignore a bad burn. But here is the part that stopped me. The reason the old method felt so effective was real. Egg white is almost entirely water and protein, and as it dries on the skin, it cools the surface and seals it from air, which is exactly what eases the sting of a minor burn. The instinct was sound, even if the sterile science of today refines it. Grandmother reached for the egg because in a house with no pharmacy for miles, the egg was the pharmacy. And that idea, the egg as the household remedy, kept surfacing in document after document. But nothing prepared me for what these women were doing with egg white on their faces, because the beauty industry has been selling us the same thing at a very high price ever since. Pull apart the ingredient list on an expensive skin tightening mask today, and you will find proteins that do exactly what egg white does. In beauty columns from the 1950s and even earlier, women were told to whip an egg white and apply it as a mask. As it dries, it tightens and firms the surface of the skin temporarily, smoothing the look of fine lines for an evening out. The yolk, meanwhile, was mixed with a spoonful of honey and used on dry skin because the natural fats in the yolk soften and moisturize. I ran the numbers on this one because I wanted to feel the difference in my own pocket. A single egg costs a few cents. A jar of the department store version of the same idea can run you 40, 50, sometimes $60. These women were getting the same tightening effect for the price of one egg they already had in the icebox. That is not nostalgia, that is arithmetic. But here is where I stopped thinking about pennies and started thinking about something much bigger. Because as I moved from the beauty columns into the garden guides, I found the old timers were not throwing away the shell either, and the reason why turned out to be backed by soil science. Every eggshell you have ever thrown in the trash was almost pure calcium carbonate. Around 94 to 95% of it, in fact. That is the same compound sold in bags at the garden center under fancy names to correct the soil. The gardeners of the 1950s knew this in their bones. They dried their shells, crushed them fine, and worked them into the soil around their tomatoes and peppers. Why tomatoes and peppers especially? Because those plants suffer from a condition called blossom end rot, an ugly black sunken patch on the bottom of the fruit, and it is caused by a calcium shortage. The crushed eggshell worked into the soil slowly releases calcium as it breaks down and helps prevent exactly that. Master gardener programs at several universities still recommend crushed eggshell in the garden today. The old women were fertilizing their vegetables with the trash we pay to haul away, and they went further. They poured the cooled water from boiled eggs onto their houseplants because minerals from the shell leach into that water while it cooks. Free plant food straight from the pot. Nothing wasted, nothing bought. Therefore, I had to ask myself the question that was now nagging at me constantly. If a single egg could feed a plant, firm the skin, cool a burn, and stretch the grocery budget, how did we forget all of this? Who benefits when we throw the shell away and buy the calcium in a bag, buy the mask in a jar, buy the remedy in a box? Hold that question because the answer is coming and it is not comfortable. First, let me show you what the old kitchens did with eggs in cooking, because even here they were smarter than we are. They never wasted a broken yolk. When a recipe called only for whites, the leftover yolks were not discarded, they were slipped into gravies and sauces to thicken them, or brushed onto bread and pastry before baking to give that deep golden shine you see on a professional loaf. That golden glow on a bakery croissant is nothing more than egg yolk or egg wash painted on before it went in the oven. A trick that costs nothing. They used a pinch of the crushed shell in the coffee pot too. Dropping clean, crushed eggshell into boiling coffee grounds was a common practice in mid-century American kitchens. The shell is alkaline and coffee is acidic, so the shell cut the bitterness and helped the grounds settle to the bottom for a clearer, smoother cup. Campers and old ranch cooks swore by it. I tried it myself with a pot of cheap, harsh coffee, and I will tell you honestly, the bitterness softened. I did not expect that. And when they had one egg left and a recipe that called for two, they knew that half of a lightly beaten egg, measured with a spoon, would do the job rather than opening another. Nothing was ever thrown out on a hunch. Every fraction of the egg had a purpose. But all of this, the storage, the garden, the coffee, the skin, all of it was leading me toward the real discovery, the one buried deepest, the one that made me question everything I had been told about my own health. And I know some of you are thinking right now that this is fine for people with big kitchens, gardens, and time on their hands, but that it has nothing to do with you if you live in a small place, alone, with aching hands and a tight budget. Stay with me, because the next part is built precisely for you. I want to talk to the person watching this who lives in one or two rooms, who cannot get down on their knees to work a garden, who counts every dollar until the next check comes. This is the part I dug hardest for, because it needs nothing but a single egg and a few minutes at your own kitchen sink. No garden, no special equipment, no trip to the store, no help from anyone. You have been standing at your own kitchen sink, watching me hand you trick after trick your grandmother knew by heart, and somewhere in there a quieter thought crept in. How many other things about your own body have you been throwing away without knowing it? That is the exact question I wrote the Senior Health Clarity System to answer. It is a 3-volume set that lands as a PDF in your email, and it does for your health signals what these old egg methods do for your kitchen. It teaches you to read what your body is already telling you, from your creatinine and eGFR numbers explained the way your doctor should have explained them, to the plain magnesium fix most seniors are quietly missing. And yes, the whole 50-year argument about eggs and cholesterol finally laid out and resolved. And here is a check you can run for free tonight, no bottle required. Pull out your last blood work, find your creatinine number, and simply write it down on paper. That one number, tracked over time, is how you protect your kidneys and catch a problem long before it becomes a crisis. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Your doctor gets 12 minutes with you. This gives you the other 23 hours and 48 minutes, and for older bones and tight budgets, that is not a luxury. It is independence. So let me give you the finale I promised, the thing I now do every morning, built on the very same instinct these old women trusted. Take one raw egg, crack it as you normally would for breakfast. Before you rinse the shell away, look at the inside of it. You will see a thin, wet, papery film clinging to the inner wall of the shell. That film is the eggshell membrane, and for most of your life you have washed it down the drain without a thought. The women of the 1950s and their mothers before them did not wash it away. They peeled that membrane out with their fingers and pressed it directly onto a cut, a splinter, a boil, or a sore. Here is how you do it right now, tonight, with the egg you were going to eat anyway. After cracking the egg, gently peel the moist inner membrane off the shell. Lay the wet side directly against the small cut, or the splinter, or the inflamed spot on your skin. Let it dry there. As it dries, it shrinks and tightens against the skin. On a splinter, that tightening action can draw the sliver up toward the surface overnight. On a small cut, the membrane acts as a natural bandage that clings without adhesive, a blessing for thin, fragile, older skin that tears when you pull off a sticky plaster. That alone is worth knowing. But it was when I went looking for why this humble film worked that I stumbled onto the discovery that ends this whole investigation, and it turns out the membrane is not just a bandage at all. It is something the medical world spent good money studying in secret, while the rest of us threw it in the bin. Let me slow down here, because you have earned this, and I want to lay it out exactly the way I found it. For years, I assumed the egg membrane was just a barrier, a thin skin, and nothing more. Then I found a clinical study published in a peer reviewed medical journal called Clinical Interventions in Aging in the year 2009. Researchers were testing something called natural eggshell membrane on people suffering from joint pain and stiffness, the kind of pain that lives in the knees, the hips, and the hands of nearly everyone I know over 60. What they found made me read it 3 times. Natural eggshell membrane is not empty. It is rich in collagen, in a compound called hyaluronic acid, and in glucosamine and chondroitin, the exact substances sold in expensive joint supplement bottles at the pharmacy. The people in the study who took natural eggshell membrane reported a meaningful reduction in joint pain and stiffness, and some of them felt relief in as little as 7 to 10 days. 7 to 10 days from the very film we have all been rinsing down the sink. I sat there thinking about my own grandmother's hands. I remembered watching her peel that membrane and hold it against a sore finger, and I remembered thinking as a young person that it was just an old woman's habit. It was not a habit. It was medicine. She was pressing the raw source of collagen and joint compounds directly onto her aching joints, decades before a laboratory would confirm what her own mother had taught her. And here is the part that turned my curiosity into something closer to anger. Those very compounds, glucosamine, chondroitin, hyaluronic acid, collagen, are packaged, branded, and sold to older people today for $20, $30, $40 a bottle. An entire industry is built on ingredients that occur naturally, for free, inside a shell we are trained to treat as garbage. The knowledge did not disappear by accident. It disappeared the moment it became more profitable to sell us the bottle than to let us remember the egg. But I want to be a straight talker with you, because that is the only way I know how to be. I am not telling you to grind up raw eggshell membrane and hope it cures your arthritis. The studies used a specific, cleaned, and processed form of the membrane, and raw egg carries bacteria you do not want in a wound or in your body. What I am telling you is that the instinct of those old women that the whole egg was valuable, that the membrane held something worth keeping, was scientifically, provably correct. They understood, without a laboratory, that the parts we discard are often the parts that matter most. So let me give you the finale I promised, the thing I now do every morning, the safe and simple version of everything this investigation uncovered. It is the eggshell itself, and it comes back to calcium. Remember that a dried eggshell is about 94 to 95% calcium carbonate, the same calcium compound sold in supplement bottles. Now here is the discovery that closes the trail. A study published in a medical journal reviewing calcium sources found that eggshell powder made from ordinary chicken eggshells was not only a rich source of calcium, but that it was well absorbed by the body, and that it may even have a positive effect on bone and cartilage. Researchers in Central Europe had been studying eggshell calcium for bone health since the 1990s, and it kept performing quietly, reliably, cheaply. For older bones, especially for women past a certain age, calcium is not a small matter. It is the difference between a strong hip and a broken one, between independence and a walker. And the safest, cheapest calcium in the world had been sitting in the trash can this whole time. Here is exactly how the old method works, cleaned up for safety with what we know now. You take your eggshells and you rinse them. Because raw egg can carry bacteria, you boil the shells for a few minutes or bake them in a low oven for around 10 minutes to make them completely safe. You let them dry fully, then you grind them in a clean coffee grinder or with a mortar and pestle into a fine powder, as fine as flour, because the texture matters. A tiny amount, no more than about half of a teaspoon, gives you a substantial dose of calcium. Old cooks stirred that powder into a glass of juice, where the acid helped the body absorb the calcium, or sprinkled it into soups and stews where no one would ever taste it. 1 egg's shell, a few cents. A dose of well-absorbed calcium that a company would happily sell you in a plastic bottle with a long name. The women of the 1950s did not have the plastic bottle. They had the shell, and the shell was enough. I tested this myself for a month. I dried and ground my shells. I stirred a small measure into my morning orange juice. And the strangest feeling came over me while I did it, the feeling of doing something my great grandmother would have recognized instantly. A motion passed down through kitchens for 100 years, nearly lost in a single generation because we were told the store-bought way was better. It was never better. It was just more expensive. Now let me answer the question I told you to hold on to, because you deserve the whole truth about how all of this slipped away. None of these methods were banned. No law erased them. What happened was quieter and, in a way, more effective than any law. As kitchens filled up with packaged products, as the pharmacy replaced the pantry, as marketing taught 2 generations that anything free must be worthless and anything in a box must be safe, the knowledge simply stopped being handed down. The recipe cards got thrown out with the estate. The home economics classes that once taught a young woman how to test an egg in water and grind a shell for the garden disappeared from the schools. The old bulletins from the agricultural extension offices went into archives that almost no one opens. The knowledge was not killed, it was allowed to starve. And every product that replaced it, the calcium bottle, the joint supplement, the firming mask, the bag of garden lime, profited from our forgetting. That is the uncomfortable truth I walked out of this investigation carrying. Nobody had to hide these secrets. They just had to make sure nobody bothered to remember them. But you remember now. That is the whole point of what we do here. We go back into the archives, into the old manuals and the university studies, and we dig these things back out into the light, one at a time, so they belong to you again. Let me leave you with the shape of the whole thing, so you carry it out of here clearly. The egg you were about to crack this morning holds a freshness test in a bowl of water, a longer shelf life if you simply turn it point down, a firming mask in its white, a moisturizer in its yolk, a golden glaze for your bread, a smoother pot of coffee from its crushed shell, calcium for your tomatoes and your houseplants, a natural bandage in its membrane, joint compounds that a medical journal confirmed in 2009, and well-absorbed calcium for your own aging bones in the shell you are about to throw away. 1 egg. 25 uses that ordinary people once knew by heart. All of it real, all of it recoverable, all of it sitting in your kitchen right now. What this investigation gave back to me was not a list of tricks. It was the feeling that I am not as dependent as they want me to be, that the answers to half the things I pay for every month are older, simpler, and closer than I ever imagined. And I think that is who you are, too. You are the kind of person who would rather see the evidence than swallow the advertisement, the kind who trusts a tested method from a real kitchen over a promise printed on a label. That is exactly the person these old secrets were made for. So tell me something, and be specific about it. Of all 25, which one are you going to try first, the egg in the bowl of water tonight, or the shells drying on your counter for their calcium? And here is the one I am truly curious about. Did your own mother or grandmother do any of these, and did you, like me, dismiss it at the time as just an old habit? Write it down in the comments below, because I read them, and I learn as much from your kitchens as you learn from mine. Tell me where in the world you are watching from, too. I always love to see how far these old methods have traveled. If you felt that spark of recognition today, that quiet sense that we have been handing away things worth keeping, then come along with the rest of us who are digging this knowledge back out of the dark. One forgotten method at a time. There is a whole world of it waiting. Next time I am pulling apart something, even the doctors argue about the truth about what our grandparents kept in the pantry instead of the medicine cabinet, and the one everyday item on that shelf they reach for before anything else. You are not going to believe what the old bulletins say about it. I will see you there. Before you go, let me share something. This video told the story, but inside I walk you through every egg trick, step by step. And if you have a question, you just ask me, and I answer you myself, a real person. You won't be alone either. You'll belong with folks like you inside the Wise Living Circle. Just point your phone at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime with one click. Come join me. Now, if those tricks surprised you, wait until you see what happens to your body when you eat 4 eggs a day after 75. The truth costs nothing, and it starts right here.